Hello again, back to Answers, the new Answers Book 2. Over 30 questions on creation, evolution, and the Bible with Ken Ham as the general editor. We are going to look at another chapter by Bodhi Hodge. And Mr. Hodge is writing this chapter to the question, how old is the Earth? The question of the age of the Earth has produced heated discussions on internet debate boards, TV, radio, in classrooms, and in many churches, Christian colleges, and seminaries. The primary sides are two: young Earth proponents, biblical age of the Earth, and a universe of about 6,000 years, or old Earth proponents, secular age of the Earth, of about 4.5 billion years, and a universe of about 14 billion years old. A universe that's about 14 billion years old. So 6,000 years, 14 billion years. The difference is immense. Let's give a little history of where these two basic calculations came from and which worldview is more reasonable. Alright, so young Earth proponents, you'll notice the number 1 note down here. Not all young Earth creationists agree on this age, even though they believe the Earth is young. Some believe that there may be small gaps in the genealogies of Genesis 5 and 11 and put the maximum age of the Earth at about 10,000 to 12,000 years. Of course, this is still a stark difference between 14 billion years, and there's not a huge amount of difference between these. And it says, however, see Chapter 5, are there gaps in the Genesis genealogies? And then, of course, we have old Earth proponents, which has a note here. Some of these old Earth proponents accept molecules to man biological evolution, and so are called theistic evolutionists. Theistic meaning they believe in God, they also believe in evolution. Others reject neo-Darwinian evolution, but accept the evolutionary time scale for stellar and geological evolution, meaning of the changes in the cosmos and changes in rocks, and the millions of years that are associated with the millions and billions of years associated with that, and hence agree with the evolutionary order of events in history. So there are little small differences between these two groups, but they're all about the same. One, it's a very short amount of thousands of years. The others, it's several billion years old, right? So where did a young Earth worldview come from? Simply put, it came from the Bible. Of course, the Bible doesn't say explicitly anywhere, the Earth is 6,000 years old. Good thing it doesn't, otherwise it would be out of date the following year, because then it would be 6001, 6002, 6003, on and on. But we wouldn't expect an all-knowing God to make that kind of a mistake. Alright, God gave us something better. In essence, he gave us a birth certificate. For example, using a personal birth certificate, a person can calculate how old he is at any point. It is similar with the Earth. Genesis 1 says that the Earth was created on the first day of creation. Genesis 1, 1 through 5. From there, we can begin to calculate the age of the Earth. Let's do a rough calculation to show how this works. The age of the Earth can be estimated by taking the first 5 days of creation, from Earth's creation to Adam, then following the genealogies from Adam to Abraham in Genesis 5 and 11, then adding in the time from Abraham to today. Adam was created on day 6, so there were 5 days before him. If we add up the dates from Adam to Abraham, we get about 2,000 years, using the Masoretic Hebrew text of Genesis 5 and 11. Whether Christian or secular, most scholars would agree that Abraham lived about 2000 BC, 4,000 years ago. So a simple calculation is 5 days plus 2,000 years plus 4,000 years is 6,000 years, and it give or take a few days. At this point, the first 5 days are negligible. Quite a few people have done this calculation using the Masoretic text, which is what most English translations are based on. And with careful attention to the biblical details, they have arrived at the same time frame of about 6,000 years, or about 4,000 BC. Two of the most popular, and perhaps best, are a recent work by Dr. Floyd Jones and a much earlier book by Archbishop James Ussher, who lived from 1581 AD to 1656. All right, so one that talks about the Masoretic Hebrew text of Genesis 5 and 11. Note down here, you can read Bodie Hodge's article, Ancient Patriarchs in Genesis, on the website Answers in Genesis. For these others, the reference is already listed here. All right, so we've just mentioned two of the most popular, Dr. Floyd Jones. We'll start with him first and go backwards. Dr. Floyd Nolan Jones, The Chronology of the Old Testament, 1993 A.D. And then, of course, the earlier date, Archbishop James Ussher wrote the Annals of the World in A.D. 1658. Or actually, excuse me, that's when it was published. He couldn't have written it that year because he was dead in 1656. But either way, the age they calculated was both 4004 BC. All right. So the misconception exists that Ussher and Jones were the only ones to arrive at a date of about 4000 BC. However, this is not the case at all. Jones, Dr. Floyd Nolan Jones, as we just mentioned, lists several chronologists who have undertaken the task of calculating the age of Earth based on the Bible, and their calculations range from 5501 to 3836 BC. So it goes down from here: 5501, 5492, 2611, 5199, 4192, 4141, 4103, 4079 BC, 4062, 4053, 51, 42, 41, 21, 5. Now we're getting extremely close to the date by Ussher, 4004, 4001, and those that believe it's even younger, they gave it even younger dates, 3983, 75, 74, 71, 71, 70, 68, 66, 64, 63, 58, 49, 27, and 38, 36 BC. All of those in a pretty small window of time, even though there is a large degree of differential here. We're going to look at this a little bit differently, though. We're going to look at it from when calculated, right? Some of these older dates will have a point to the when calculated, but it's very important. We start with this date here of when calculated. Julius Africanus dated the Earth to 5501 in 240 AD. These are all AD dates, with the entire text of the Bible being available to all of these people. All right, so the 240 date of 240, Julius Africanus. Then you come down to 330 with Eusebius, a famous Christian author and a historian as well. Then let's see. You're going to move to 810 with George Syncelus, all right? And you're going to look at 1070 AD, Marianus Scotus, 4192, right? This is the years forward in time from Jesus, of course. So 240, 330, 810, 1070, and as these go forward, you're getting down to 4192, and then moving forward, everything is after the Reformation, the year 1500 and beyond. Beyond the year 1500, beyond Martin Luther's time and everything. For the rest of these, so for the 1500s, you have down here 1575. M. Beroaldus came up with the date of 3927. 1585, A. Salmeron came up with the date of 3958 BC. Right, in that same century, P. Melanchthon came up with the date of 3964. Let's see. It's all the 1500s. Look at the 1600s here. There's lots of people in the year 1600. Thomas Lydiot and M. Michael Maslinus, both the year 1600. One came up with 4103, one with 4079. Two others in the year 1600, Jacob Salianus, 4053, H. Spondanus, 4051, also very close. Let's see, also in 1600, C. Longomontanus. That's a name, and he came up with a date of 3966. Moving forward from 1600, we have 1609, J. Scaliger, 3949. Moving forward in time, to 1630. A. Helwigius had a date of 3836. Then moving just a little bit backwards, 1627, D. Batavius, and then you jump forward in time. There look to be no 1700s. There's a couple 1800s. We have an 1830, E. Greswell, 4004. This matches up with Archbishop Usher. As you may have already noticed, that's one of the most famous dates that's used in Christian circles is 4004 AD from Archbishop Usher. Greswell came up with the same number in 1830. Let's see. Same year, Dr. William Hales, 5411 for a date BC. Same year that was being checked on, but because of a different set of criteria to determine date, at 5411, even though it's partly using the Bible to do so. All right, and let's see. Then we have the 1900s, right? We have in 1913, Martin Anstey. So we moved to the 20th century. Martin Anstey in 1913 came up with 4042, pretty similar to Usher's date. Let's see. 1975, Frank Klassen came up with 3975, still pretty close. Then 1986, E. Falstich came up with 4001, extremely close. And then we can actually move into the 21st century. We have a date of 2003, 3971, W. Dolan. The rest of these, E. Rusnerus, J. Claverius, Beck, Reinhold Lange, Ricciolus, Condamanus. All these have no date made available because it was probably written about third hand. And these are all from Dr. Floyd Nolan Jones, Chronology of the Old Testament, AD 1993. So I had a big work that he was going on there. Let's see. Excuse me, not all these dates are from that, but that was when his date was from. They give the listing there on page 26. All right. So as you will likely note from Table 2, the dates do not all match up with Usher's. The dates are not all 4004 BC. There are several reasons chronologists have different dates. It says down here, others would include gaps in the chronology based on the presences of an extra Canaan in Luke 3:36, but there are good reasons this should be left out. See chapter 5, are there gaps in the Genesis genealogy, as we've already mentioned, and chapter 27, isn't the Bible full of contradictions? It's not a rhetorical question. They're actually going to explain that. All right. So, it says, the dates are not all listed as 4004 BC. There are several reasons chronologists have different dates, but there are basically two primary reasons. Some used the Septuagint, or another early translation, instead of the Hebrew Masoretic text. The Septuagint is a Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, done about 250 BC by about 70 Jewish scholars. Hence, it is often cited as the LXX, which is the Roman numeral for 70. LXX means 70. Septuagint also means 70, because it was 70 Jewish scholars that worked on it. It is a good translation in most places, but it appears to have a number of inaccuracies. For example, one relates to the Genesis chronologies where the LXX, the Septuagint, or 70, indicates that Methuselah would have lived past the flood without being on the ark. And this is a huge problem because, of course, every living person at that time that was not on the ark died, and the people on the ark survived. Methuselah was not one of the people that lived on the ark because only Noah, his wife, his sons, and their wives got on the ark. Methuselah was not among them. More so, dates from the Masoretic text point to the fact that Methuselah, in the dates that are given in the Masoretic text, that Methuselah would have died just before the age of the flood, which makes a lot more sense than him being able to survive a catastrophic flood that killed everyone, but not him. Also, Methuselah was a godly man, so that wouldn't have made sense for him to be judged in the flood. He would have been on the ark. All right. But he died of a very, very old age, being the oldest man ever recorded. All right, let's see. So we have these longer dates, right? And they said the first 4 dates in the entry, the longer dates, the 5,500, the 5,400 dates, all these longer dates, they have to do with those taken from the Septuagint. It says that in the first 4 in Table 2. We'll get to that in a second. So that's really important. So we've already mentioned that there appear to be a number of inaccuracies. Some of the Septuagint historical data doesn't make any sense. Therefore, it would be weird to use the dates from them to try to come up with the actual history. First 4 in Table 2 are calculated from the Septuagint, which gives ages for the patriarch's firstborn much higher than the Masoretic text or the Sumerian Pentateuch. We'll get to that in a second. So the other issue, remember looking at reasons chronologists have different dates, several points in the biblical timeline are not straightforward to calculate. They require very careful study of more than one passage. These include exactly how much time the Israelites were in Egypt, a debated point, and what Terah's age was when Abraham was born. See Jones's and Usher's books for a detailed discussion of these difficulties. It's definitely a good bit of information to learn, but that's a separate study. But that'll be the main reason why you have so many different dates, besides the ones that are basing themselves on the problematic Septuagint Genesis chronologies. So the first 4 in Table 2 are calculated from Septuagint, which gives ages for the patriarch's firstborn much higher than the Masoretic text or the Sumerian Pentateuch, a version of the Old Testament from the Jews in Samaria just before Christ. Because of this, the Septuagint adds in extra time. Though the Sumerian and Masoretic texts are much closer, they still have a few differences. See Table 3. All right, so Table 3, Septuagint, over here. Masoretic text, the one that was said to be more reliable. Septuagint less reliable. And Sumerian early patriarchal ages at the birth of the falling sun. And we'll see a middle-of-the-road reliable is what it's seeming to point out here, right? So the age of Adam, when he had his, basically would be considered his firstborn. Adam had Cain and Abel before this, but Abel was killed, and Cain was banished, so he no longer had a firstborn in terms of lineage. And now Seth would be his firstborn at age 130. Sumerian Pentateuch is the same. Septuagint, however, says his firstborn son Seth would have been age 230. Seth is then listed at 105, 90, 90, 70, 70, 65, 65. All these are matching up, but in the Masoretic and Sumerian Pentateuch. But Seth is 105 here, 205 in the Septuagint, 90 in Enosh, 190 in the Septuagint for the firstborn date. So basically they were saying that, Adam was 230 years old before he had the first kid. Seth was 205 years old before he had the first kid. Enosh was 190, right? And these are 100 years added to each one. Canaan, 70. Canaan here, 170. Mahalalel, 65. Mahalalel here, 165. Another 100 years added. Jared, 162. This one's 162. This one, it seems like the years have been taken away. 62. Enoch, 65 and 65, but over here, another added 100 years. 187 for Methuselah. Oddly enough, there's 167 in the Septuagint. This one goes lower for whatever reason compared to the others. Lamech, 182. A few years added. Septuagint, 188. This one's, they all don't match. 53 is the Sumerian Pentateuch. And of course, they don't match here either. 187, 67. And then Noah is the one they all match up on, 500. Basically, that was the 500 actually is the specific date given for Noah when he is called to start building the ark. And 100 years later, they actually get on the ark, as according to the historical narrative given there. All right, so that's the only ones that match up all the way across. You can see how the Septuagint seems to mostly add dates of the earlier ones. All right, so that's Table 3. So that's what they're saying is very problematic. So Septuagint adds an extra time, though the Sumerian and Masoretic texts are much closer, they still have a few differences, as we got to see. Using data from Table 2, excluding not using the Septuagint calculations, and including Jones and Usher, the average date of the creation of the Earth is 4045 BC. This still yields an average of about 6,000 years for the age of the Earth. Right? So, basically, 6,000 years, give or take 100 years. 50 to 100 years. Depending on how you look at it. Someone's a little bit younger, someone's a little bit older, but it all comes back to right around 6,000 years. Now we're going to look at extra biblical calculations for the age of the Earth. Cultures throughout the world have kept track of history as well. From a biblical perspective, we would expect the dates given for creation of the Earth to align more closely to the biblical date than billions of years. This is expected since everyone was descended from Noah and scattered from the Tower of Babel. Another expectation is that there should be some discrepancies about the age of the Earth among people as they scatter throughout the world, taking their uninspired records, meaning those not from divine revelation, not inspired by God, taking their uninspired records or oral history to different parts of the globe, right? All right, so the two expectations are that there should be, if Noah is continuing this genealogical chronology as he gets off the ark, all of his descendants are going to know about those basic dates. They're going to know that basic history and how long the Earth had been around, and they're going to start putting that around in their cultures even after they reject God and move on and whatnot, as it talks about in the Tower of Babel section and afterwards. Right, and the second part is that there should be some discrepancies because, historians change events, and they change stories about the flood as the flood legends went all over the place. So it says, under the entry Creation, Young's Analytical Concordance of the Bible lists William Hale's accumulation of dates of creation for many cultures, and in most cases, Hales says which authority gave the date. See Table 4. All right. There's reference to the numbers here, to the works here. Robert Young's Analytical Concordance of the Bible, and Bill Cooper after the flood. We'll look at him in a second. Table 4. All right, here's Table 4. Right, selected dates for the age of the Earth by various cultures. All right, so we have a few interesting ones here. We don't know who the authority is that listed these, but we have the Vatican giving at one point the Catholic, which using the Septuagint, already shown to have historical inaccuracies, 5,270. German reformer by Martin Luther, partially influenced by Martin Luther, supposedly 3,961 BC is the age they're giving. That's a lot closer under the Reform section. Then we have the German Holy Roman Empire by Johannes Kepler, 3,993, also still pretty close. That's authority listed here as the historian Playfair. Playfair has others, including the Israel-Judea section. Josephus was an early writer, early historian, and it says Israel-Judea by Josephus, by Playfair, Jackson, Hales, University History, and these have dates that Josephus records: 5,555, 5,581 BC, 5,402 BC, 4,698 BC. Okay, those are all one section. We're also going to look at Israel-Judea by computation. 3,760, Strachus is the historian there. Israel-Judea by Rabbi Lippmann, 3,616 BC is the idea for the university history. And then we're going to notice Strachus also has up here Spain by Alfonso X. Strachus and Moeller both give a similar date here. One says 6,984, the other says 6,484 BC. These would both give a date of about 8,000 years to 9,000 years for the age of the Earth, and you'll notice that these seem very similar. One says 6984, one says 6484. Quite possible that there was a mistranslation here and one of these numbers was mistakenly recorded by one of the historians from an earlier text, because they both start with 6 and they both end in 84. Then we're going to look at a few others here. Samaria, we have a 4427 date by Scaliger. Here's some interesting ones. This is more interesting because of the types that we're getting, right? We're going to look at all kinds of types from people who would have rejected the Bible, or rejected God, rejected the idea of Noah and his God, and following the clear teachings that have been set down by him, and they would have changed stories and changed things, but only slightly, right? Just as the flood legends dispersed all over from the Tower of Babel, so with the dates. And so we look at India, and we look at Babylon. Babylon has a 5344 date recorded by Petrus Aliasens. India has a recorded date 5369. Megasthenes is the recording historian for the authority. So that's Babylonian and India. Now we're going to look at Persia to the east, and Egypt to the east, to basically the west, but in Africa there. So Persia, 5507 and 6081. Not too far off there. Both of those recording historian was Bailey. Chinese and Babylon, also by Bailey, 6157 BC, 6158 BC. This is really interesting that a Babylonian source and a Chinese source had almost exactly the same date for the age of the earth, BC. And then India, there was two more for India. One was 6174, 6204. One was by a historian named Gentile. The other was from Arab records, which they had kept in the Middle East for India. All right. So the basic thing to take from this is that these are all ancillary evidence that shows that it should be very easy to connect this with the Tower of Babel. People left the Tower of Babel, they spread all over, they changed the dates very slightly, but their records indicate things not going back very far. An early age of the earth, backing up the young earth creationists, even though their dates change a little bit here and there, they're all very extremely similar. Not 100,000 years, not 500,000 years, not millions of years old. Their idea of the age of the earth it does not go back very far at all. All right. And it says down here, Luther, Kepler, Lippmann, and the Jewish computation likely used biblical texts to determine the date. So that would make those less relevant than the ones in Egypt, Persia, India, Babylon, China, and the other Babylonian one as well, and Samaria. Those ones would be more separated and should have changed much more from the Bible if there was no Tower of Babel, if there was no scattering of cultures. All right, more info for that. Historian Bill Cooper's research in After the Flood provides intriguing dates from several ancient cultures. The first is that of the Anglo-Saxons, those Europeans, whose history has 5,200 years from creation to Christ, according to the Laud and Parker Chronicles. Add 2,000 years, that'd be a 7,200-year-old date for the age of the earth. Cooper's research also indicated that Nennius's record of the ancient British history has 5,228 years from creation to Christ. The Irish chronology has a date of about 4,000 BC for creation, which is surprisingly close to Usher and Jones. Even the Mayans had a date for the flood of 3,113 BC. This meticulous work of many historians should not be ignored. Their dates of only thousands of years are good support for the biblical date of about 6,000 years, but not for billions of years. So let's look at the origin of the old Earth worldview. Prior to the 1700s, few believed in an old Earth. The approximate 6,000-year age for the Earth was challenged only rather recently, beginning in the late 18th century. These opponents of the biblical chronology essentially left God out of the picture. Three of the old Earth advocates included Comte de Buffon, Comte de Buffon, who thought the Earth was at least 75,000 years old, Pierre Laplace imagined an indefinite but very long history, and Jean Lamarck also proposed long ages. and this can be looked up. Terry Morton says The Origin of Old Earth Geology and Its Ramifications for Life in the 21st Century at Answers in Genesis. All right, so it says, however, the ideas of millions of years really took hold in geology when men like Abraham Werner, James Hutton, William Smith, Georges Cuvier, and Charles Lyell used their interpretations of geology as the standard rather than the Bible. Werner estimated the age of the Earth at about 1 million years. Smith and Cuvier believed untold ages were needed for the formation of rock layers. Hutton said he could see no geological evidence of a beginning of the Earth, and building on Hutton's thinking, Lyell advocated millions of years. That's where millions of years started. From these men and others came the consensus view that the geologic layers were laid down slowly over long periods of time based on the rates at which we see them accumulating today. Hutton said, the past history of our globe must be explained by what can be seen to be happening now. No powers are to be employed that are not natural to the globe, no action to be admitted except those of which we know the principle. So the idea here is the present must be the key to the past. Things in the past must have been happening like they are happening in the present. Couldn't have been a flood. They don't believe in it. So uniformitarianism must be correct because they believe it to be correct, and therefore the Bible must be wrong. This viewpoint is called naturalistic uniformitarianism and excludes any major catastrophes such as Noah's flood. Though some, such as Cuvier and Smith, believed in multiple catastrophes separated by long periods of time, the uniformitarian concept became the ruling dogma in geology. And of course we see rock layers, God's word is truth versus man decides truth, looking at, again at the same data as it said in earlier chapters. We're going to continue the rest of this in the next video. I'm going to take a pause right here.